The city is barely waking as you shuffle into your kitchen. Small, a little cluttered, the kind of place where every shelf does double duty. A neighbor's car alarm chirps, a bus hisses to a stop outside, and somewhere above you, someone is already starting their day with loud footsteps and questionable music. Your herbs grow in mismatched containers on the windowsill, an old mixing bowl, a cracked mug, a thrifted planter you patched with epoxy. Morning light glances off the jars of dried kitchen scraps you're saving, onion skins for dye, coffee grounds for compost, eggshells for your balcony tomatoes. Nothing matches, but everything has purpose. You heat water in a dented kettle because buying a new one feels wasteful when this one still works. And we have a cat interfering with Nell.
Of course. Delta me.
The hum of the refrigerator and the soft bubbling on the stove blend into a city kind of magic. The kind that reminds you spirituality isn't reserved for wide fields and hand-built cottages. It exists here too, between concrete and sky, in the ritual that keeps you grounded in a place that never stops moving. The incense you light isn't for aesthetics. It's for cleansing the stagnant energy from too many people packed too close. You sweep the floor because it feels like clearing your mind. You water your plants because they root you in the way the city never could. This isn't cottagecore. This isn't a dreamy forest fantasy. This is urban pagan homesteading. Resourceful, intentional, chaotic, and sacred in its own way. A life where magic hides in kitchen cabinets, in secondhand furniture, in the hum of a pressure cooker, in the small acts of care that transform a cramped apartment into a living, breathing sanctuary. This is the real work, not curated, not filtered, just deeply lived. Welcome, witches, pagans, heathens, spiritualists, and anyone interested in living sustainably. This is
Old Ways, New Days, where the old ways meet the good dirt.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Nell. And each week we explore the sacred art of living close to the land. From compost to covens, chickens to charms,
We're reclaiming self-sufficiency, seasonal living, and ancestral wisdom.
whether you're stirring your cauldron or your soup pot,
This is a space for wild-hearted folk walking the homesteading path with intention, magic, and muddy boots.
Hi,
Hi.
how goes it?
Good. Kind of a heavy-hitting topic. It's a little bit of a trigger warning, I suppose, because a lot of people are into cottagecore.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little on the anti-consumerism side of things.
So this one is listen at your own risk.
Yes.
Don't come at us.
Or do, and then, we'll just get ratings that way.
Just don't come at us. So today we're going to talk about the vast, often hilarious, sometimes painful gap between cottagecore aesthetics and cultcore, this cultivation of actual spiritual self-sufficiency. Because there's a world of difference between wanting to live like a forest witch and actually doing the work of one.
Cottagecore as an aesthetic exploded because it offers escape. A soft-focused version of rural life where everything is sunlit, linen draped, slow, and photogenic. The problem isn't the beauty. Beauty is real. The problem is the illusion that homesteading is primarily aesthetic instead of labor, and that spirituality is found only in curated calm instead of effort. Let's be honest about where this conversation starts. Cottagecore exploded across social media in the late 2010s and became absolutely massive during the pandemic. And I get why. We're all locked in our apartments, doom scrolling through disaster after disaster, and suddenly our feeds are full of bread baking, flower picking, and soft linen dresses in meadows. It was escapism at its finest, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But here's where we need to draw a line. Cottagecore, as it exists on social media, is largely a consumer aesthetic. It's about buying the right things. The mushroom lamp, the chunky cardigan, the vintage-looking milk bottles. It's fast fashion in a prairie dress.
The irony? The actual cottage workers, the historical farmers and homesteaders that this aesthetic romanticizes, lived in direct opposition to consumer culture. They couldn't just order new things. They made do. They repaired. They innovated with what they had. Real pagan homesteading isn't about matching pottery, frolicking in meadows, or baking bread in a white dress. Like, are you kidding me? It's about showing up for the land even when it isn't pretty. Frozen compost, stubborn weeds, late night canning sessions, livestock emergencies, and tending fires when you're tired. The aesthetic is optional. The work is not. And ironically, the most magical moments rarely photographed well. The dirt under your nails during planting, the cracked hands after winter chores, the bruised knees from tending a stubborn broody hen. These are initiations into land-based spirituality. Not the soft focus filters of cottagecore, but the raw authenticity of what some jokingly call, quote-unquote, cultcore, the gritty, real, practice-driven life of earth honoring.
Let's time travel for a moment. I want to take you back to pre-industrial farming communities. Whether we're talking about medieval European villages, ancient Celtic settlements, indigenous agricultural communities in the Americas, or homesteading anywhere in the world before mass production. What's striking when you study these communities is how nothing, and I mean nothing, was single use. Take something as simple as a wooden bowl. In an ancient household, that bowl might start its life as a mixing vessel in the kitchen. When it cracked, it did get thrown away. It might be repurposed to hold dried herbs or grain. Cracked more? Now it's a scoop for chicken feed. Fall apart completely? The wood goes into the fire, and the ashes go into the garden as fertilizer or into soap making. This is what I call object life cycle consciousness. Everything had a birth, a working life, often multiple second lives, and even its death served a purpose. Historically, household magic was born from the practical, not the pretty. Ancient farming communities, from Iron Age Celts to Nordic lands to early Mediterranean villages, built homes where every item had at least two jobs. A bench was a bed, a cooking pot was a cauldron for dyeing cloth, a loom was both tool and altar. Multipurpose living wasn't cottagecore, it was survival. Archaeological findings show that Celtic roundhouses often had a central hearth used for cooking, ritual offerings, healing herbs, and crafting. Norse longhouses kept animals inside during harsh winters. The warmth was shared, and so was the responsibility. Roman rural households used the same tools for daily chores and religious offerings, because the boundaries between sacred and mundane was non-existent. Medieval European peasant homes commonly had furniture built to last generations, patched repeatedly and handed down. Nothing was single-use or decorative. Spirituality was woven into the tools of daily life. Here's something cottagecore definitely doesn't show you. In many pagan farming communities, the scythe, the plow, the spindle weren't just tools. They were blessed at certain times of the year. They were carved with protective symbols. They were passed down through generations with ceremony. The old woman's spindle wasn't just for making thread. It was a connection to the goddess, to the fates, to the cycle of life and death. When she spun, she was participating in cosmic order. This is the core of pagan homesteading. Magic is what you do with your hands, not how you decorate your home for the best photo.
So let's get brutally honest about what spiritual self-sufficiency actually looks like. Because I think there's a dangerous fantasy that it's all sunlit gardens and herbal teas. Real homesteading means your hands are constantly damaged. Cuts, scrapes, calluses, broken nails. Not because you're not careful, but because working with the land is inherently rough. It means sometimes your magical herb garden fails. Not because you didn't see intentions or draw the right moon symbol, because of aphids or blight, or because you live in a city apartment and 3 hours of indirect sunlight just isn't enough for tomatoes no matter how much you believe. It means animals die. If you're keeping chickens for eggs, eventually a predator gets one, or one gets sick, and you have to make hard decisions. That's part of the cycle too. It means preserving food is hot, exhausting work. Canning in the summer means your kitchen is a sweltering nightmare for hours. Fermenting means sometimes batches go wrong and you have to throw them out. But here's what I want you to be clear about. I'm not saying this is to discourage anyone. I'm saying this because the work is the practice. To live spiritually self-sufficient doesn't mean you abandon community. It means you cultivate a relationship with your environment that is reciprocal and intentional. This includes growing even a small portion of your own herbs, cooking from scratch to understand ingredients, learning repair and maintenance skills, honoring the land spirits through consistent stewardship, recognizing the household as a living system, not a curated set piece. Spiritual self-sufficiency is slow magic. It's not glamorous, and it's not meant to be. It's the kind of magic you feel in your back after a long day and in your soul when you see the jar of dried herbs you tended from seed to shelf. It's the magic of doing the work even when nobody is watching.
So let's talk about one of the most radical acts of modern paganism. Refusing to buy new crap.
Hate buying new stuff.
I know that sounds funny, but hear me out. We live in a culture that has completely disconnected us from the life cycle of objects. We don't know where our stuff comes from. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know where it goes when we throw it away. And that disconnection is not just an environmental problem, it's a spiritual problem. In traditional cultures, repair wasn't just practical, it was meaningful. The Japanese art of kintsugi,
Kintsugi.
What is it?
Kintsugi.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where broken pottery is mended with gold lacquer isn't about hiding the damage. It's about honoring it. The bowl is more beautiful because it was broken and repaired. Its history is part of its value. In European folk magic, there are traditions of speaking to objects while you repair them, thanking them for their service, asking them to continue to serve. When you repair something instead of replacing it, you're making several statements. First, you're saying this symbol has value beyond its newness. Second, you're saying you have the skills and knowledge to care for your possessions. Third, you're refusing to participate in the extractive economy that mines the earth, exploits workers, and creates mountains of waste. That's powerful. That's a political and spiritual stance. I want to distinguish between upcycling as an aesthetic trend and upcycling as an actual practice. Aesthetic upcycling is buying distressed furniture from West Elm that's made to look old and worn. That's consumerism pretending to be sustainability. Real upcycling is taking the broken dresser from the curb, learning to fix the drawer runners, sanding it down, maybe painting it with leftover paint from another project. It's not perfect. It might not match, but it's yours. You saved it from the landfill. You learned a skill. My grandmother, who lived through the Depression, could look at a worn-out bedsheet and see dish towels, cleaning rags, quilt squares, and eventually compost. Nothing was wasted. That wasn't poverty consciousness. That was abundance consciousness. She could see the abundance of possibility in what others would call trash. Here's where I get a little fired up.
Oh boy.
I know, because I haven't already been.
Right?
The cottagecore aesthetic often relies on fast fashion. People buying cheap prairie dresses made in factories with exploited labor, made from synthetic fabrics that will fall apart in a year or less. The actual cottagers, the actual farmers, the actual wise women of history, they wore their clothes until they fell apart. And that wasn't within a month. And then they repaired them until they couldn't be repaired anymore. And then they used the fabric for something else. Many of them made their own clothes. They knew how to spin, weave, sew, knit, mend. These were baseline skills that we have definitely lost. And yes, learning to sew your own clothes or knit your own sweater is time consuming. It's often more expensive up front. It's not always perfect. Pagan homesteading is naturally resistant to high consumerism because its core values: reciprocity, stewardship, cyclic living, reject disposability. Historically, people repaired because they had to. Today, we repair because it keeps us aligned with the earth. Key practices to include mending instead of replacing. Clothing patched becomes clothing blessed. Upcycling, old jars become canning vessels, candle molds, spell jars, herb storage, and drinking glasses. Avoiding fast fashion, choosing natural fibers or second-hand clothes that align with land-based ethics. Reclaiming wood, metal, and fabric. Old furniture becomes altars. Broken tools become magical implements. Investing in durable goods. Tools designed for decades, not seasons. To maintain instead of consume is an act of rebellion in a disposable culture and a return to ancestral common sense.
So the real work of pagan homesteading isn't a look, it's a lifestyle, a commitment, a rhythm. It means early mornings and late nights, soil-stained knees and smoke-stained clothes, meals built from what you grew, preserved and bartered, living with seasons rather than despite them, finding the divine in function, not just form. It's a sacred labor, it's a devotion, and like all devotions, it's more about consistency than charm. The real magic is in the work, not the aesthetic surrounding it.
So, even though you want those picture perfect moments.
Right. Yes, you can create them, but it's not the same as making them yourself.
Correct. And and some things are simple enough to multitask.
Correct.
A lot of us, if we're watching TV, we aren't actually watching TV anymore.
You're listening.
You're listening because you're playing games on your phone or you're doom scrolling social media while the TV's on in the background. Well, instead of doom scrolling and looking at all these fantastical cottagecore pictures,
create it yourself.
Crochet.
Yeah.
Learn how to embroider. There's nothing more satisfying than taking a pair of jeans that have a rip and embroidering a design, even if it looks like crap the first time.
Nothing's perfect. My first time crocheting, it was horrible.
And, just keep at it.
And now, honestly, YouTube is a huge help now in almost everything you want to learn how to do.
Correct.
And
so, go ahead and, if you want the really pretty stuff that Cottagecore shows you, learn how to make it yourself. It's not as hard as you think. It really isn't.
You know that jar of spaghetti sauce that you just had? Use it as a cup.
Yeah.
Rinse it out, wash it.
None of my dishes match.
What's a matching dish?
Technically, all of my dishes are from my grandmother, and half of them can't even go in the microwave because they're the original Fiesta ware, which has uranium in the paint. So,
Weird.
You know, a little cancer
Never
radiation
hurt anyone.
going on.
I'm sure your walls here have lead in the paint too.
Well, with how old the house is, I'm sure too. Yeah.
Well, it's nothing like my workplace. It still has what you might call it in the floor. Asbestos.
Oh, asbestos tiles on the floor.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that lovely.
Yep. So, all right. So this is, I don't know what date this is coming out on. Probably either December 3rd or December 10th. So just a reminder, make sure you get all your entries in and collected for the contest.
Whoop, whoop.
Winner will be announced on the 15th.
Ooh, it's coming close.
I know. So it'll be announced on Facebook, and then of course, hopefully we can maybe get that person on the phone. That would be really cool.
Ooh. If they want to talk.
If they want to talk. If they want to be live with
Ooh.
us on a podcast.
Depends on who that lucky person is.
I guess, yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Right?
Yeah. So, till next time, listeners. This has been
Old Ways, New Days.